Perfect. All right. Now that the robot has told us that we are recording, I'll start sharing my screen here. As I'm doing that, I'll share one quick one. We actually build a lot of relationships with people we support, and an individual we support. He calls in very often to tell a joke to one of our remote staff. It's very often the same joke, but it's one that I've actually started telling some of my friends and successfully annoying them. So how do you make a waterbed bounce?
I don't know how.
Fill it with spring water. So that was that was a funny, dad jokes kind of imply that they're also bad jokes. So, but take it for what it's worth. But no, thank you for that great introduction, reading out those fun little bios there. As Rachel mentioned, we are with Night Owl Support Systems. We are a remote supports vendor, but there's a lot more to remote supports than just technology. And hopefully today, that message could come across. I know we're talking with Rachel, and even just sitting through some of the stuff that Rachel was saying today, there's a lot of similarities between some of the benefits that people and, caregivers and care recipients can receive from remote support. It's very similar to what they can receive from respite care as well. There seems to be some kind of central themes that are the same there. So, but I'll ask for, Leslie, if there's a question in the chat or anything where we need to stop and address anything, feel free, or we can just address some questions at the end, whatever works best. So I usually, can everyone see the title screen here? Is the title screen up and running? I think it should be good.
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. All right. The little menu here is not going away, but that's okay. Eventually, I think it will. All right. So I guess, let's start here again. We usually spend a kind of 30 seconds on the title screen. And we're going to get into what remote support is, and a lot of people might have an idea of what remote supports are. Some people have heard of it, some people may not have. The people who have heard of it might think it's just all about technology. That's absolutely one piece of the pie, but there is much more to it than that. There's a human element that runs through everything, and as Rachel said, again, we are talking about humans. Brief history on us as a company. We, Night Owl Support Systems, we're 20 years old at this point, in one form or another. Again, as Dani's bio kind of led on, this service was born out of the Weissman Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, here in Madison. So the three shining faces you see there, you see Dani's smiling face at the top. Underneath her on the left is Dwayne Temple, and on the right is Chris Patterson. These are the three individuals that were part of that sound response program at the Weissman Center and eventually brought Night Owl into its current form. Between the three of these individuals, they have over 90 years of experience working with people with disabilities. Our admin team has over 200 years of experience working with people with disabilities. I don't say that to toot our own horn or anything, but to kind of illustrate the fact that we're not some Silicon Valley group that developed some software or some technology and thought, hey, this would be a fun industry to get into. We really come at everything we do from a place of experience and passion, whether it's family members, academics, professionally. That experience and passion drives everything we do. And if you see the focus there, the focus originally and throughout time is always number one on increasing independence and improving outcomes for the people we support, in whatever shape that may take. One size does not fit all when speaking about people with disabilities, as I'm sure you all know. So we really pride ourselves on getting creative in improving those outcomes. And that kind of that flows through again with our mission to deliver quality remote support services by creatively using technology and ultimately allowing people to live with more independence. That's always been the goal. And then there's other ways recently that we found that we could help both caregivers and care recipients as well. So quickly, why do some of our partners use remote supports? What are some of the benefits before getting into what it is and all of the details that make up our service? There's that word again, independence. That's always been the driving force for 2 decades now. People could live, a little bit more with more control to the greatest extent possible over what their living situation is. Within that same realm, 1A to independence is safety and security. You can't truly live independently if you're not living safely and securely. So that goes 1A along with just the independence. But then recently, lightening the load, and this could be for several different parties along the way. So this could be for caregivers. This could be for the care recipient as well. Rachel, as you mentioned, respite helps both sides of that equation. It really helps. Remote supports really helps the same way. So we'll go into how that could help. But recently with the pandemic, there's been, and we help a lot of folks that are maybe already working with residential providers and in other situations other than respite as well. But, whether they're in that environment, whether they're in respite, with COVID, day programs went down. There was a lot less in terms of help when it comes to having people in the home, having services that might have been widely available. And now, hours are less, manpower is less. Caregiver shortages are across the industry, across the country at this point. And so this is actually an area where we found that we could help get people through some of the hardships that the pandemic has caused. All right, so I want to take a little bit of a stop here and talk about what remote supports really is. Again, I mentioned in the beginning, we encounter people that have heard about remote supports. We've encountered people that have never heard of it. The people who have heard of it may have one idea or another. And Rachel, you're talking about all the acronyms that you just had to talk about. I feel like I learn a new one every day, and there's a new term that comes out when it comes to remote technology, and there's assistive technology, enabling tech, remote monitoring, all these different terms that are out there. Some of them are great, some of them are bad, but there's so many of them. So we've gotten together with some other remote support vendors around the country, tried to create some common terminology. This is not the full definition. If you go to, we have a coalition, and we could give Rachel some of that information, but we've got a very lengthy definition, try to include everything that remote supports is and isn't. I decided to take some of the highlights and put it here in this presentation. So remote supports is a technology-based service that allows trained remote support professionals, or RSPs as we call them, to deliver live support to an individual at a remote location. Those RSPs, they're awake, alert, and they're only focused on providing remote supports during the times that they're on shift with us. Remote support should not, or should always, be selected by the individual and their team and incorporated into that person's service plan if they have one. Again, this is basing on what existing care they're already getting. And then remote supports are not intended as a wholesale substitute for either in-home staff support, in-home caregivers, family members. It's meant to combine with those supports and actually improve the care that's given across the spectrum, whether it's us or their existing caregivers. So when I get to this slide, I'd like to say, if there's one thing that you take away from this, it's that the word technology, again, is only on here once. It's at the very beginning. It is a part of remote supports, and I'll quickly get into some of the things that our technology does and what it helps provide us and help us provide to the people we support. But it is just one piece of the pie. It's the vehicle that gets us to where we need to be to support the people we do. So keeping that in mind, again, as we go through the rest of this, I think will help highlight all the human elements, the human pieces that go into a service like this. All right, so if technology alone is not the answer and isn't the only thing that makes remote supports go, what is? And we've really broken down what remote supports is to us and what makes our service what it is in what we call our 5 components. As you see there, technology is one, and I'll touch a little bit on that as well. And then with any of these components, if you're looking for more information after this, Rachel could get you connected with us. We could go into more in-depth conversations about any of these, about our service in general. I want to make sure we save enough time for questions here today. So I'll just kind of start going around the circle here, and it's not an accident that there's a person in the middle. Everything we do is person-centered, is really meant to be the best interest, not only of the people we support, but their support team and their caregivers as well. So starting with remote support professionals on the top left, as I mentioned, these are our staff members that are providing that remote care. I like to call them our day-to-day champions. They're the ones that are interacting with the individuals we support, whether they're in a residential setting, whether they're in their family home and their caregiver or their parent or loved one, is taking that break, taking that respite, if you will. These are the individuals that are communicating with those individuals, caregivers, and monitoring all of the devices and technology that's in their home and helping them live more independently. So I'll give you an example. We have a common device that we have is a door sensor. You put it on a door, if a door opens, it sends us a notification. We've created what's called individualized protocols for everyone we support that tells our remote staff what they need to do if a device sends them a notification. And so I'll use that door sensor as an example. For one person, maybe someone's allowed to go out and get the mail. Maybe they have a fenced-in backyard and they're allowed to go out and enjoy it on their own. And if we get a door sensor for that individual, maybe our staff, if they get back inside after a certain amount of time, maybe they don't really need to do anything. Maybe they just include it on the report the next day that it happened. But for the same device, for someone down the street, maybe that door sensor means someone's bound to get confused if they go outside, or minor elopement risks, or there's someone in the neighborhood that shouldn't be there that's coming around. And with that person, then at that point, that protocol is going to tell our staff to do something different. So really one of the main jobs of our remote support professionals is to monitor those devices, monitor the notifications that are coming in, taking the appropriate steps that are outlined in each person's protocol and plan, and ensuring that the support is as robust as it needs to be. As I mentioned again, they communicate with the individuals that we support. They're able to reach out. They're able to proactively reach out as well. Maybe you don't wait for a door sensor, but maybe you check in to say, hey, I know it's your parents coming home in a little bit here. How's everything going? Have you remembered to take your medications? Are you cooking? Things like that. And then lastly, there will be always times, and this might actually be more appropriate if someone's already receiving residential services or services through a different provider as well. But there are times where if something happens when we're monitoring someone remotely, where we need to have somebody go over to the home or get someone's attention to physically intervene, we identify who those people are and our remote staff get in touch with them. So that's really, in a nutshell, a basic overview of what our remote staff do. I'll say that they go through the same trainings that direct in-home residential staff go through, from everything from HIPAA and abuse and neglect all the way down to bloodborne pathogens and CPR. On top of that, most of them have been direct in-home staff before as well. So I'll leave that there. Again, they are the day-to-day champions that make everything move on a day-to-day basis. The second component is our central monitoring station. This is where our remote staff work. It's a secure facility here in Madison that houses all of the software, all of the hardware, everything that's needed to take in all of the device notifications from all the homes we support and present them to our remote staff. There are multiple redundancies in our central monitoring station, from things like duplicate phone and internet servers, a power generator, down to an actual secondary location in case, God forbid, anything would happen catastrophically to this location. And then lastly, we do offer up to 24/7, 365 support. Our name is Night Owl Support Systems, and for 18 plus years, that's all we were. We only monitored people at night, but the pandemic really offered a good opportunity to start supporting people during the day. I mentioned we support a lot of individuals that work with residential providers. Maybe they go to day programs during the day. When the pandemic hit, a lot of those day programs weren't happening. A lot of residential providers couldn't get staff to the home, and so we started monitoring people during the day as well. We continue to do that now. It just offers some flexibility, especially for groups like this who may be receiving respite care, might not be working directly with a residential provider. All right, so I want to get into our third component, which is technology. The first two, again, that's kind of the remote piece on our side. Technology, this is the technology that's in the homes we support. And again, it's just the vehicle we use to get to where we need to be in terms of supporting the people we do. When it comes to our technology as a whole, and if you want a list or some examples, some pictures, again, we could talk about that later or send you some additional information. But we see ourselves as a sensor-based company when it comes to our technology. We don't normally offer any camera-based devices inside a person's home. We feel that that's a big issue for privacy, for dignity, and frankly, our staff, we don't have the staff to physically monitor all of the cameras in all of our homes 24/7. And so with that, we've been sensor based. Some of the sensors that are included are a panel with a two-way audio communication capability. We have door sensors. We've got bed sensors that go under mattresses to see if there's any seizure type movement or if someone's been out of bed for a certain amount of time. Flood and moisture sensors, movement sensors, personal pagers, a button to get our attention. Med dispensers and everything in between. We're able to potentially pull in other assistive tech devices. So an example is a Ring doorbell. I think everyone knows what a Ring doorbell is these days, but if you don't, it's a doorbell you put on the outside of your house that has a camera attached to it. And you can look at live feeds as well as historical data. While we don't provide those, we work with a lot of homes that install them themselves, and that access to that video feed can be shared with our staff. And so now as that door sensor goes off, our staff can then look and make sure, yep, someone's out there getting the mail, or they look disoriented and we need to take a little bit of a different action. So other than that though, yep, our technology is sensor based as the primary function. I mentioned we have redundancies in the central monitoring station. We've got redundancies in our technology as well. We have battery backups and cell card backups for communication. The good thing about these, as well as a tamper evident sensor in our devices as well. The great thing about these is it actually tells us when the backups are being used. So if we have another night coming up that's 25 below, I know we had one, or had a couple, here last week, I think. If we get a notification that one of the homes is using that battery backup in their devices, we know to notify someone to make sure there's heat, make sure that everyone in the home is safe for the night, stuff like that. So redundancies in our technology and in the home is very important as well. And then lastly about the technology, and I'll leave it there after this, is that all of our devices, they're portable and adaptable. What does that mean? Portable, if you start using our services and use our devices and let's say you move, let's say, someone, maybe your family member moves bedrooms within your home. Maybe you and your family member move entirely. It's very easy for us to take that technology out of a home and reinstall it again. There's no big construction cost or any huge alterations to the homes. And then adaptable, we don't lock anyone into any packages. You don't get the gold package or the silver package. You don't have a long-term yearly contract. If we need to take devices out, maybe put devices back in, maybe that your loved one gets up at night and goes to the fridge, and you don't necessarily want to stop that, but you just want to know how many times it happens. We can put devices in just to track things. So we can be very flexible in terms of how the technology is used, what technology is in there, how much, and all of that. So we try to make it so that you're not locked into anything. Those flexible changes could be made with relative ease. Our fourth component is our responder piece. I mentioned this a little while ago when talking about the remote support professionals, but especially when we're supporting adults who are maybe, working with a residential provider and they don't have a family member there, but even if a family member is in the home and maybe taking a rest, maybe sleeping for a bit, there's going to be times where a physical need is present, or someone needs to get over to the home and physically intervene due to a certain situation. We identify who that person is in all situations, how to get in touch with that person, when, and what to do if we can't. What are the backups and all of that? Because all of the redundancies are great, but there may be a time where we just need somebody to go over to the home. These individuals can be either agency providers, agency employees, natural support individuals, whatever makes the most sense. Again, probably depends on the audience that that we're talking about at the time. But again, we could get very personalized when it comes to how we interact and when we get a responder involved. I'll tell a quick story. We support an individual that had severe mobility issues. They needed to be repositioned at night every 2 hours. But other than that, slept through the night and didn't need a ton of support. We started supporting this individual, but put in the stipulation that if we didn't get a door sensor notification on his bedroom, signifying that someone's coming in to reposition him every 2 hours, we were going to send that responder a reminder. And so that person could then reach out to the repositioning staff and they could make sure someone gets in there and does that. In terms of results for that situation, when we first went live, we gave a lot of reminders because those positionings were missed. Over time, the reminders went down. The individual went to the hospital and his skin had not been as clear of bed sores in over 5 years. So it's really just a great example of how we can get flexible in terms of working with that responder, working with the people with the boots on the ground in the area. But also it's a nice story that ends with some really positive outcomes for an individual who you might not think would be the first candidate for a service like this. So it's an example I'd like to tell very often. And then lastly, our last component, I think, is our most important one. It's our consumer relations team. All of the components we've talked about already. We have our remote staff and our central monitoring station. You've got the technology in the home. We've identified who is in the area, the boots on the ground, if we need to have somebody go over to the home. All of that's great. But if you don't have anyone making sure that everything is tied in together nicely, everything is tuned in the way it needs to be, then you really could end up in some trouble. And so this team truly is the glue that holds everything together. They're constantly evaluating if the devices we have, if the responses our remote staff are taking, if any action or setup or device is not contributing to the improvement of a person's outcome in their lives, this is the team that ensures that changes. They stay in constant contact with you and your teams, especially in the beginning. This is a new service, often like respite care. Rachel mentioned some of the fears in terms of starting to use respite care. Some of those concerns can be kind of shared with a service like this. And so we understand we've been doing it for 20 years, but this is a new service for you. And so especially in the beginning, this team stays in contact with you, make sure that any data, any reports of events that happened, the day or night before gets shared with you, at a certain frequency. Any special events or big events get documented by our remote staff and then shared with you by our consumer relations team. So really, again, this is the team that is just evaluating that we're doing what we need to increase the independence, improve the outcomes, give a person's caregiver the rest that they need, and we're adequately supporting the people the way we need to. So can't speak highly enough to the work that this team does. All right, so I kind of blew right through that because I definitely wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions. I've got just a couple wrap-up slides here. Those are our 5 components, but you might be thinking, how do you assess if individuals could be a fit for a service like this? And the answer is it depends, which is not always the best answer to give. But again, going back to the idea that one size fits all is not really an option when it comes to supporting people with disabilities. So we understand everyone is different, everyone's situation is different. So the process for us in terms of how we get involved, we want to have a conversation with you. We want to talk about some of the needs and concerns that you already have identified, some services they're already experiencing. Again, when that responder comes into play, how far away are they? Are we going to use a family member down the street? Are we going to use an agency employee? Are we going to wake up the family member in the home? All of that really impacts how we could support people and what situations we could support. Any insights from the teams and people that are already caring for the individual as well. A lot of times we encounter people with disabilities who have expressed desire for a service like this, for more independence. And no one really knows, because you need to actually talk with their team and find out who those people are. So really, it really depends. We're going to be the first ones to say if we don't think a situation is right for us. Because again, the last thing we want to do is impact someone's life negatively. Rachel, I love that term. We're talking about humans here. I mean, that's it. This isn't just a program. It isn't something where, yeah, let's figure it out. Let's have a discussion. Let's try and cross all the T's and dot all the I's. If we don't think it's a situation we could help, we'll be the first ones to let you know. So with that said, that's kind of it for us. I want to put this kind of last slide here, and then I've got our contact info, but Rachel could share that with you as well. But everything we do is person-centered. When it comes from the technology to the service delivery to evaluating if everything is good, the person that we support and that person's team is everything. Is really everything needs to be focused for that and on that person, and that really drives everything we do. So that's the quick and dirty version of what remote supports is with Night Owl. I'll leave this up here for a tiny bit. Again, if you don't get this down, don't worry. But what questions, what comments do you have? I know this is maybe a newer topic to a lot of folks here.